Hey, my friend, do you realize how important your breath is to everything in your life? On this amazing interview, you will learn how to use your breath to reconnect with your physical and emotional self, your nervous system, your heart, so you can learn about who you really are. Stay tuned for an exciting episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, my guest is Josh Trent, who's the founder of Wellness Force Media and host of the top-ranked iTunes podcast, Wellness Force Radio. Josh has spent the past 18 years as a researcher, trainer, and facilitator discovering the physical and emotional intelligence for humans to thrive in our modern world. The show notes for this episode are going to be at antiaginghacks.net/wellnessforce. With that said, Josh Trent, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Faraz, thank you. What a cool space you've created. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here, brother. So walk the listeners through a little bit of your background, if you will, Josh, and your decision to get into the wellness space back in 2015 or 2016.
Wellness chose me. I didn't choose to get into it. And it chose me because I had a lot of deep, dark contrasts when I was young around my mother, my father, my lack of health intelligence, my lack of emotional intelligence, my lack of physical intelligence. I reflect on this because there's a lot of work out there, whether you're in spirituality or self-help. And the question I think we all ask ourselves at some point in our hero's journey is, did I actually choose to come here? Did I choose my parents? Did I choose this situation? And the more and more I learn about the esoteric realm, the subconscious realm, and also just the practical 3D realm, the more I start to understand that I actually did choose to come here. And I reflect on that because my story that got me into wellness was I was born to a mom that had mental health issues, bipolar. My dad left home when I was super young, and I had a lot of stress that I didn't know how to feel. And I found this drug called food. And a lot of people use the drug of food. I just didn't know. It was a dark blind spot. And you know this because you've been through Tony Robbins and I'm sure a lot of emotional intelligence training. A blind spot is something that we don't even know we don't know. It's so dark and it's so in our subconscious, Jung calls it the shadow, that I did not even know that I didn't know that the tools just simply weren't there. The physical tools, the nutritional tools, the emotional tools, like for whatever reason, I chose to come into this situation that I'm honestly still figuring out, right? I'm 40 years old, I'm about to be a father. And so I'm still figuring out, why did I choose to come here? And I have a sense that it was wellness that brought me in, because wellness is something that we are innately all born with. I don't care how you're born. If you're born with any type of conditions or diabetes or any kind of health condition, there is some part of your soul and there is some part of your being that is well. So wellness is innately gifted to us because we're all sovereign beings. And so what I found on this journey from like being a very young kid, always feeling there's existential tension in this world. People treat each other poorly. There's hatred. There's bigotry. There's judgment, there's evilness, there's darkness, right? The yin yang exists for a reason. And so I just was accosted with all of these feelings and emotions I didn't know how to feel. And so I found food when I was a kid and I stuffed down all those emotions with food. And then, flash forward for us, I'm 21 years old. I'm 280 pounds. I'm in a job I hate. I'm in a relationship I hate. I mean, I was ripe for transformation, ripe for it. And I'll never forget this, man. I was drinking at a party because alcohol is something that a lot of young 20-year-olds do to just simply not feel their feelings, because they, first of all, don't have the awareness to know what their feelings are. And secondly, they don't want to give themselves permission to feel those feelings. So alcohol comes in just like marijuana comes in, just like pornography comes in, just like shopping and addiction to work comes in. And these are all things that push down our emotions. And so that was my lesson in my journey that brought me to slamming down a party cup at a table, looking at my belly, feeling disgusting in my body, and running home drunk because I had a moment with spirit, with God, with higher intelligence. And I felt this message say, there's more to life than this. There's more to life than this, than drinking and not feeling. And so I ran home drunk. I pulled up the computer. I typed in how do I be healthy? And then that led me on this 18-month journey of losing 100 pounds and then gaining weight and back and forth. And, that brought me to a place where I was just so upset with myself and I didn't know exactly what to do, that I thought leaving my circumstance would somehow change the quality of my life. But I learned a deep lesson 10 years later from this point. I'm like 25 years old at this point, 24, 25. It was only in my early 30s that I realized wherever I go, there I am. So just because I change my external environment does not mean that my mental programs, my subconscious programs, my behavioral programs ever change. The only thing that can really recode programs is deep emotional work, including somatic experiencing, and also reassociation, potentially astral travel. And I can go into some of those terms, but that's what brought me back home. Was like I had lost a bunch of weight in Hawaii. I got back to America, or to the mainland, and I started training and coaching, and 10 years in fitness. And when I left fitness, because that part of my journey was through, I went through 3 years of really deep, dark despair and really deep depression, because my whole identity was being a fitness professional, and I had that ripped from my being. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I was done. And sometimes in life, that is the most courageous thing we can do, is honor our feelings and actually listen to our feelings, because our feelings are ancient. Our feelings guide us down to the emotions, which is energy in motion. So there's a lot more there, but essentially the arc of the journey brought me back to being fired from a corporate job, having to put my back against the wall and really ask God with tears in my eyes, what is it you would like me to do? And the answer was Wellness Force.
Wow, fascinating. You dropped a ton of knowledge and little hints there that we're going to unpack a little bit, Josh. But right now, you host the podcast where you interview some world-class folks, just at the top of their game. I believe you sent me a little recording with Paul Chek. It was a couple months ago, and I watched it, and it was just fascinating, that clip that you sent me. So obviously, you're learning from some of the masters in this game. What is your current authentic self, and how does your current authentic self want to help people and want to serve?
My authentic self is a curious, self-reflecting, powerful, trusting, authentic leader. That's who I am. And the way that I see myself in the world being of service is to help men and women discover physical and emotional intelligence. And you and I both know intelligence is not how smart you are. Intelligence is your ability to gather information, listen to podcasts, read the books, go to the seminars. But the one piece in the arc of intelligence that most people miss is they miss the application phase. Everyone wants to go from gathering to embodiment, and they want to skip the part where they're getting sore, getting bloody, and getting bruised. But what's most important that people do is they focus on the whole arc being the journey itself. And the arc is you gather, you apply, and you embody. And when you embody, you're then sent back to the beginning again for you to gather new information, gather new intelligence, and apply that, and then embody that. And that only stops when we leave the planet. That only stops when we leave our physical form, because we are an expression of consciousness, right? Whether you're spiritual or scientific, if you want to live a long, healthy life, I know this audience in our community here is about longevity. If you want to have a life that is long and healthy and fruitful, you have to be willing to realize that your egoic lens that you have been taught unknowingly to see life through has to be cleansed and polished, and maybe even discarded and replaced, if you really want to live a long, healthy life. Otherwise, you're living the unhealed wounds of your mother and father and your grandmother and your grandfather. And that's not a healthy, long life for any of us.
Okay. So let's talk about just a small moment, because this will serve as a backdrop to what we discussed later on. Was when you switched careers, when you started Wellness Force, as you mentioned, you got that answer from God. Even though you had the answer, man, I'm sure there were a lot of steps that you just kind of walked us or just didn't mention, where there's insecurities, where you have to like question yourself and you think, am I good enough to do this? Am I the one? Why should anybody listen to me? How did you bridge that gap and like leap into your insecurities at that point?
You know what's really cool about your question is you said this phrase, am I the one? And the answer is always resoundingly, fuck yes, I am the one. Just like you are the one, just like every single person you've had on your show, they're the one. If you've watched The Matrix, you remember a scene where Morpheus was describing Neo, and he looked at him and he said, I know this is going to work because I know you're the one. Mm-hmm. And the reason it gives you and I chills right now to know that movie is actually real life is because all of us chose to come here, and we are all the one. We are the arbiter of truth for ourselves. If we're conscious, if we're aware of our mental programs, specifically subconscious programs, that is what allows us to step into our most authentic self, our highest self. So to answer your question, I wanted to give that as a pre-frame because the massive parts of me that were wounded, not healed, not aware, I wasn't aware of these parts. These were the things that on a very deep psychological level were holding me back from stepping into my real power. And my real power is having conversations that matter, being an authentic, trusting, inspiring leader, like I shared with you, that hinges on the pendulum of curiosity and of the 5 virtues of being a real man. So these, and that's how I identify myself, right? I'm a man, and I'm a masculine energy in a body, but I float between the masculine and feminine. And so the long answer to your question is, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel valuable. I didn't feel like I was enough. It's the same story that we all hear because we all drink from the river of forgetfulness when we come to this planet. We all drink from, it's in religious text. We all drink from the logos. We drink from this river where we on purpose forget how powerful we are. On purpose, we forget who we are because that's the whole game here is we either we are inherently gifted with this power of choice. And so it's up to me to be the one to choose how I want my life to be. This isn't spiritual mumbo jumbo. This is legitimate, scientific, and also like realistic steps that all of us must take if we want to wake up to the highest quality of life we can have. And that only happens when we're our most authentic self and our most highest version of ourselves. And so I had to go through those beliefs for us of like, who am I to speak on a podcast? Who am I to share about health and wellness? My body isn't perfect. Why am I a wellness person? I mean, just the incessant monkey mind of fucking lies and loops that we all either entertain and indulge or we send love to and they fade away. So those were the biggest pieces that I had to really go through, that I chose to go through.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Josh. I think this conversation that we're having today, right now, is so different than all the other guests I've had because I haven't focused on spirituality, on looking inwards so much. I've been talking about rejuvenating the body using science and other ways, but I think this is so crucial because it all comes together at the end of the day. And so I want to touch on a book that I read, and basically there's a lot of YouTube videos, and we talked about this just briefly before we started. It's by Joseph Campbell. The book is called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. I think on YouTube and other online publications, it's called The Hero's Journey. And so why is the hero's journey important in our life? And how does that apply to pretty much everybody?
The hero's journey is most important because we go through multiple phases of it in our life. And unless we are self-aware enough to know where we are in the journey, we could potentially fall into victim consciousness. Victim consciousness makes you die early. So this is 100% related to living a long, healthy life. The biggest hack, if you will, for anti-aging is self-awareness. Self-awareness is the most powerful hack that doesn't involve you sitting in front of a photo biomodulation unit, being in a cold tank, going in a sauna, extending the life of your telomeres. All these things are amazing, and I'm not discounting them in any regard because they're very healing and they can extend the quality of your life. But what most people do is they try to intellectualize their life, and intellectualism is neck up. What I'm talking about is, and this is what Dr. Hawkins talks about in Letting Go, closing the gap between our head and our heart. That is the most important thing to recognize. The hero's journey is not only real, but the hero's journey is something that we are always continuously on. The hero's journey is a circle. It's a continuum. Just like when you sleep and wake, or just like when there's high-low pressure in the world, or just like the sodium and potassium pump in our physiology, all these things are dependent on what Alan Watts calls the nature's vacuum. The nature's vacuum is always operating on a place of chaos to order, or high pressure to low pressure. It's the exact same thing for emotionality and for spirituality, yet so much of this is wiped away because it's, quote, too gushy or too much feeling in the scientific community. The reason why we are at war right now with science and spirituality is because both sides have been abused. Both of these modalities of teaching have been completely abused by people that probably started out with good intentions, but were hooked into the dark energy along the way. And this hero's journey is threefold. We start our hero's journey. We are initiated. We are separated. So the very first part of the hero's journey is we are separated. We are separated from what we know. So for myself, I'm separated from California, where I grew up for 40 years, right? We're all growing up. I am now initiated here in Austin. That's the second phase of the journey. So I am in the initiation phase. The initiation phase of your hero's journey is where you go through the ordeal. It's where you cross multiple thresholds. It's where you learn by contrast, by pain. You don't have to suffer, and we can talk about that too, but you will experience pain in this lifetime. It is inevitable that we will experience pain. And then, of course, the third realm, the third arc of the hero's journey is the return. You return to your community where you were originally separated from, and you share with them the gift. And the gift is what you've learned, what you've applied, what you've gathered, and what you've embodied. So the hero's journey and the arc of wellness that I talk about, they blend together. It's actually a Venn diagram. And in the center, there is everything that you have embodied, that you know, and that you represent because of your journey. You don't come back and share the gold. You come back and share the journey of you reaching the gold, because the journey is the most valuable thing.
Right.
And so that's really the arc of the hero's journey, is that, separation, initiation, and return. And it's only in the return where we can become the teacher, the master, the sage, but you cannot skip the journey.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The journey is happening to us all the time, as you said. And once you kind of start to understand that this is what's going on, and you start to delve in and research just the hero's journey. And I think there's a mindset shift that might happen for some people. It happened for me. I went from being a victim of, I don't know what I'm doing, why is this so hard, to I'm the hero of this journey, right? I'm going to figure it out. I have to fight the battles with the demons. I have to go in the dark caves, but I'm the hero and I will make it through, because every hero makes it through. And so that subtle shift gives you a subtle boost in confidence that shows up in your life and allows you to tackle the world differently. So it's so crucial that people learn about this if they haven't already. Let's touch on.
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah,
because you brought up an amazing point, and I want everyone here with us to just feel this. Just take a big breath right now. Let it go. You just chose to take a breath. We just chose to breathe together. Along the way of the hero's journey, we are constantly forced into choice points. And in choice points, we're either breathing or we're not breathing. We're either loving or we're coming from fear. We're either moving towards our most highest self, or we're retreating back into our lower self because we're in fear. And these are all okay. These are all welcome. I'm not here to shame anyone or to make anyone wrong on this path. But you brought up an amazing point. And so I wanted to layer that in our conversation, because all of the things that life brings us, they truly are not just spiritually bypassing, not trying to create some kind of social media meme for you here. Everything that happens for us is truly happening for us to propel us towards higher consciousness, to propel us towards higher growth. That is the biggest hack, the biggest anti-aging hack on the planet is self-awareness and connecting our head to our heart.
Love that. So speaking of programming, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but let's talk about what happens to us, where these deep-seated beliefs come from. The I'm not enough, I'm not loved, all of these, right? And of course, between the ages of 0 to 7, a child is just a sponge that's absorbing everything that a parent is saying. I've heard, I believe this was from Brian Tracy, in that a child cannot even distinguish between sarcastic humor or just plain talking. And so it absorbs everything that you're saying. So that's a very crucial phase. And then on top of that, in our formative years, beyond child, middle school, high school, we're obviously pinging the environment to see where we're at in relation to others. And then that forms our self-identity after the parental phase. And then I think I've heard you talk about a lot of traumas that are also embedded in here, which then by the age of 18 or 20, you're like, okay, this is who I am. I've got all this trauma, all this baggage. How does someone acknowledge, first of all, that they have this trauma instead of watching Netflix or drinking? How do they acknowledge their trauma and then try to reverse this emotional baggage?
It goes back to self-awareness, and it's a really rich question. It's a really deep question. So it might take a while for me to unpack, but essentially what I heard from you is first of all, how do we realize and how are we self-aware enough to know if we're living life from trauma? Is that the initial question? And then was there another part in there as well?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's the conditioning that we don't even know about, right? As a child, it's just embedded deep into our subconscious.
Got it. Okay. So the trauma, how do we know if we're living from trauma? And also, how do we know if we're living from programs and conditioning? Let's go to the trauma first. The first thing I'll say is when we have trauma, our nervous system operates in a specific way. And I'm sure you've talked about on your show the central nervous system and obviously the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic meaning automatic. It happens to synergistically hold homeostasis in our body without us having to do anything, like the beating of my heart, the breath in my lungs, the way that peristalsis digests my food, the way that my body excretes it. These are all things that happen automatically. This system gives us clues. The autonomic nervous system, it dovetails with the endocannabinoid system, which also connects with the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system in our gut microbiome. So we have these systems converging through efferent and afferent nerve endings in the body. And so essentially everything is talking to everyone else. A good analogy might be the forest and the mycelium network that Paul Stamets talks about, where all the trees I believe it's in Germany, there is literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of trees that are all connected, and they're connected by this mycelium network, which is the fungi. We have the same thing. This afferent and efferent nerve endings in our body, they are constantly communicating to the brain and then back to the nerves. And so why I'm saying this is because you, as a being, Faraz, Josh, somebody here watching and listening with us, everyone is a product of their physiology and also their consciousness. So how do we know if we're coming from trauma? Our nervous system will send us signals. Our nervous system will give us clues. So how do we know if we're coming from trauma? First of all, you have trouble breathing. Second of all, you hold tension somatically in your system. You can see the chakra system behind me. Your sacral chakra and your root chakra is digestive, sexuality, and finance. So if you feel any one of those areas in your life, when you think about them, this is a big one. When you think about them, do you feel your nervous system contract or do you feel your nervous system expand? And that's a somatic experience that really, this is what I work with my clients on. And this is what a lot of practitioners in health work with their clients on is when you start to think about something, how does that thought turn into a feeling? And how does that feeling turn into an emotion, which is energy in motion? And how does that translate to you taking an action? So the biggest lens, the most simplistic lens to know if you are coming from trauma, and by the way, there's two types of trauma. There's capital T trauma, which is sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse. That can cause major rifts in the psyche and the subconscious. And also there's lowercase t trauma. For us, there's neglect. There's being made fun of. There's being left out, being left alone, being abandoned. All these things, if you stack up 25 lowercase t traumas, can be more severe than 3 or 5 capital T traumas. Now, just to say this in one sentence, trauma is trauma. So the clue set to see if your body is still experiencing trauma is to use your nervous system as the guidepost and use your breath, your blood pressure, the way your body is storing fat, the way that you feel in your nervous system when you're approached by a person, a place, or a thing, or a thought. If anything at all, how do you know you're in trauma? If anything at all makes you feel contracted, then you know there's something to look at there. You know there's a gift there. And when I say contracted, what I mean is your blood pressure rises, you get short of breath, you go into that fight or flight response. So you can see by my explanation how so many of these systems are interwoven together that it's not necessarily just a simplistic answer. So how do we know we're experiencing trauma? Well, it could be lowercase t or capital T trauma. And it could be just as simple as you notice when you're experiencing a person, place, thing, or thought that you feel a contraction in your system. That's how you know that you're dealing with trauma. And of course, there's many, many intricacies we can explore there. Any thoughts on that before I move on to the second one, which was the programming and the beliefs that we basically get served from our parents?
No, I think you explained that well. So I get it. Yeah.
So layer that we chose a tough one in this lifetime. We come in here, there's like the two types of trauma, and then there's also the conditioning, and then there's also what we're experiencing in life as well. So the challenge is trifold. So on the second tier of the challenge, there's inherited beliefs, inherited programs. I had Mark Wolin on the podcast, and he wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You. This is a therapist who's been working with clients for almost 3 decades. Family Constellation is his website and also his book, It Didn't Start With You. It really explores generational trauma. And all generational trauma means is that, for an example, your grandfather or your grandmother was born potentially, let's say, in Nazi Germany. And when they were born, they came into a world that was about war and fear and control. Well, guess what their nervous system did? Their nervous system had to adapt to that fear and control and negativity. And so then they put that into the psyche and the minds of the children that they birthed into the world, which is essentially our mothers and fathers. And so that gets pushed to us as well, unless we're aware of the generational trauma, the beliefs, and honestly, the bullshit that is being passed our way. All that does is just perpetuate. Alan Watts calls it all retch and no vomit. Everybody's just retching and retching and retching, but nobody ever throws up the beliefs because they're not aware of it. They're not doing the deep inner work to become aware of, hey, maybe I actually am not in fear, and maybe life is heaven on earth, and maybe all the stuff I'm seeing about COVID isn't true, and maybe I'm really not a controlling egomaniac that isn't worthy of love. Wow, did I learn that from my father? Did he learn that from his grandfather? And so on and so forth. This is why when my son comes, his middle name is Morrow. And my son will be here in June. And the reason I named him Morrow is because that is a reminder to me. It's my grandfather's first name, who fought in World War II. He was a brigadier general. It's an honoring to the past, and it's an emptying of any karmic lineage for the future. So I'm honoring my son by giving him my grandfather's first name so that he knows I am always going to do my inner work and my healing work so that I do not project my bullshit onto my son. I do not project my scarcity, my fear, my traumas, my unhealed wounds with my father, my anger, my resentment towards my mother, or anyone that's in my lineage. Like, it stops with me, period. End of story. It stops with me because that is my whole mission on planet Earth. Like you asked me, right? What is my most authentic self? Yeah. I cannot be that if I'm projecting my programs and my bullshit onto you, your audience, my son, or anyone else. So there's a radical emotional inventory that we must take in order to get to this place. And it takes time and patience and kindness to oneself to have that thing unfold.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what these experiences that we've had in early childhood or even passed down, as you mentioned, by our parents or grandparents, then they become stories in our life. And these stories are how we look at the world. Therefore, if I'm a victim because of this, and I'm this, and I'm that, instead of how can we reframe that story to say, well, that happened to me or my father, but that was a gift. And here's why it's a gift. And therefore, this is what I'm able to do because of that gift. And of course, I'm simplifying that massively.
Sure.
But I've learned that, at least going to Tony Robbins, I credit Tony Robbins for giving me jet fuel because, man, I had some conditioning as well, as I'm sure you did. And it like that jet fuel got me into the stratosphere so I could at least think clearly and make decisions based on not my past, not my earning potential in the past, not what my parents were telling me, not what my friends were telling me, but based on where I wanted to be and what my true pull was instead of like the push that I was doing every day. So again, there's a lot there, Josh, but how can people start to shift the stories and heal from this? And I know there's some modalities we can get into, but from a simplistic standpoint, how do we like talk about this?
Well, there's a term called reductionism. And so for podcasting, reductionism can apply because, we have a small window to talk about some very large concepts. Mm-hmm. And so reductionistically, how do we start using tools, embodiment practices, self-awareness techniques in order to transcend the cords and the hooks of these stories, really, and these ways of being from our parents? The very first thing that every human being must learn, and it is non-negotiable, is how to use your breath to connect to your own body. Now, when people hear that, they might be like, well, what do you mean, Josh? Like I breathe all day long. Right. The challenge with that, and I'll go back to childhood because you talked about 0 through 7. Every day, I believe it's 50,000 plus neurons that are being created when a baby's in utero. And it might even be more than that. Think about that number, 50,000 neurons between the axons and the dendrites. Like, wow, I mean, there's a lot of communication going on with a fetus. So to the degree that child's in a mother who is loving, kind, at rest in her parasympathetic branch, the biggest thing that mothers can learn how to do is to breathe well. And this is what we talk about in our Breath and Wellness program, that is a 21-day program, because I found that it takes around 3 weeks for most people to hook into a new behavioral pattern. And in my research, I really found that it's over, I believe the data is 70% or more of people are what's called upper cross breathers. So the initial question, how do we start to become self-aware enough to pull away from these stories that aren't true? We have to connect with our breath, and we have to take an inventory of us actually breathing well. Most people are kyphotic. Kyphotic means that your pectoralis is tight, your head is forward, and you have almost a bubble in the middle of your back. You've seen these people that kind of droop forward. And it's interesting, as I'm talking to you, I'm reminding myself to stand up straight.
Yeah, me too.
Because when we're kyphotic, we're breathing in all of our breath that's meant for the diaphragm. We're breathing it into a tight, smaller space in the upper chest. And that doesn't make us do anything besides retract and constrict into the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, or freeze, by the way. Fight, flight, or freeze. So that's the very first step for us, is start to take a real understanding and a real curiosity of, how can I breathe better? Can I breathe through my belly? Can I breathe through my nose? Can I exhale through my mouth? And the reason I talked about what happens with a baby in utero is the example I can make now. If you cover a baby's nose, like if you plug a baby's nose, they'll start to choke, because we all come out of the womb as a child. We don't know what it's like to breathe through our mouth. We don't get it. Babies are wired to breathe through their nose. So again, if you cover a baby's nose, they'll start to choke. And it's only by watching their parents that mirror neurons are created so that a child can learn, and then he or she will close their nose and start breathing through their mouth. But it's a stress response. Mouth breathing is a stress response that's taught from these generational hooks, from this generational kind of bullshit that isn't true. Now, granted, there is a time to breathe through your mouth, like when you're being chased in public, or if somebody's attacking you, or if you need to run somewhere, or maybe lifting weights, there's a place for it. But all in all, that's the starting point. So if we want to unpack the stories that are running our lives, and we want to start understanding, like, how do we reprogram these? We cannot reprogram or do anything unless we are self-aware enough to know that they exist. Period. End of story. That's the starting place for anything else that we would ever talk about.
That's fascinating. So let's take a quick segue, Josh. You've brought up self-awareness multiple times already. Is there a diagnostic tool or an exercise that you do for folks that are listening that they can say, let me think about this. How do I figure out if I'm self-aware, if what, the blind spots, as you mentioned as well earlier, what I don't know that I don't know, or that I know that I don't know. In that respect, what can people do in terms of an exercise or modality or something where they can identify some of these where the areas where they're not self-aware?
You begin with the breath in mind, and from the breath, you have a practice of meditative stillness. Now, it doesn't mean that you're sitting on the top of a mountain and you're wearing a big purple necklace with like a big rock on it and you have a white cape flowing in the wind. What I'm talking about is you take a real inventory. I have an emotional inventory practice that I do with my clients. And the very first thing that you do when you want to take a deep emotional inventory, just like you would take inventory of your business, right? If you're a shopkeeper, you'd look in the pantry and you'd see, okay, what do I have for today's meals? What do I have for today's customers? We never do that. We are never taught to do that in life. And there's a big story behind why we're not taught to do that, which we can get into. But let's get into what it actually is. An emotional inventory process is using your breath and somatic experiencing to just make a recording of what is. And the way you do this is you turn off your phone, you go into nature, you learn how to breathe properly, and I can absolutely help you and your audience. I have a really special gift that I want to give them at the end of the show. And when you learn how to breathe properly through your diaphragm, through your nose, pulling your body open, somatically grounding yourself, then you can breathe and then you can meditate. Most people are really piss poor meditators because they're not breathing properly and their mind is racing. So if you breathe first and know how to do that, then you can meditate, and then in the meditation, something is going to come up. You know why people meditate? It's to train themselves to let thoughts come and go. That's the whole point of meditation, right? Is not to attach to thoughts. not to make thoughts that you think so real. Yet, if you're not still enough and you're not quiet enough, you might start to believe all these thoughts. You might start to believe you're unlovable, you're crazy, you're stupid, you're fat, you're not worthy, it won't work out, you're not a good person, people can't trust you, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it'll literally just, it's like a hamster in a wheel, the monkey mind. This ties into the fact that in meditation, things will come up. Then if you're in a place that's quiet and your phone is off, you simply take out a journal, you take a pen, you draw a line down the middle of the sheet. On the left side of the sheet, you write hurt/stress. You write 10 things below hurt or stress that are causing you the most stress or the most hurt. And you be real about it. You've just done your breath work, you've sat in meditation, something came up there. Write 10 things that are causing you pain or stress. Then on the right side of the paper, write 10 things that you are authentically, truly grateful for. Not just like, oh, I'm grateful for Netflix, or grateful for my sandwich. And if you are, great, but it has to be something where you're not just ticking it on a box. You feel in your system that you're grateful. And then this is the big key. You fill out the 10. One thing I forgot to mention at the top of that right column, you just write grateful for. So you write the harm and the stress, or the hurt and the stress. And then on the right side, you put grateful. When you're done with that, you do one more round of breath work, and you, from a place of courage, this is the big piece, from a place of courage, you make a promise to yourself in that moment, right now, that you're going to circle something in the left column that you are willing to change, period. I took stock of an inventory. I've written down 10 things that I despise, that are causing me pain, that are causing me contraction. And by the way, they're just clues to programs, which is something that we can get into. Once you circle that, then on the right side of the paper, you circle something that you truly are most grateful for, right? Like for me right now, I'm most grateful for my connection with my partner, Carrie, and our coming son. This love that I feel, this river that I feel. So that is the very thing that you circle, and then you circle on the left the thing that you hate the most or causing you the most stress. You take those two things. You take courage from your heart, from your being, and you share that with one person in your life. And it could be somebody in a community, it could be here on Zoom, or it could be anyone at all that you trust, that really wants you to succeed, that really wants you to achieve your most optimal self, your highest self. And you straight up tell them, you say, Faraz, I took my emotional inventory today, and I know the thing that's causing me the most pain is that I really haven't dealt with my father issues. I really hold a negative charge towards my father still. The thing I'm most grateful for is I'm most grateful for my child. I'm most grateful for my breath. I'm most grateful for my home, whatever it is. And you make a declaration to that person from your emotional inventory that you took the ownership to take. And you say to that person, I'm committed to changing this thing. Can I ask you for your support? And they're going to say, of course, because vulnerability yields progress. When you're vulnerable with a friend and you really share with a friend, if they're a good friend, they'll offer how they can support you in that. And then, of course, as you go along the way to changing it, you use what you're most grateful for as fuel when the times hit you the hardest. When you're committed to changing the thing that hurts you the most, you have to have gratitude. You have to have what's called a positive anchor in your system that'll allow you to get through the shitty parts where you're on your knees and you're crying and everything sucks and you want to stop. You have to have a positive anchor to pull you through that. So that's the emotional inventory process that anyone can do at any time. And I found that when I work with my clients on their life and their business, both, we go through this process.
Fantastic. Now, let me ask you something. There's the breath work that we were talking about. As you mentioned, people might say, well, but I breathe every day, so how's this different? And,
sure.
And of course, there's the deeper belly breathing that we can talk about as well. When I interviewed Christian Minson, who's a common friend, on the podcast, he was talking about the breathwork sessions that they do at Rhythmia or other places where it's more of a sustained breathwork session that could last 30 to 60 minutes. And there's like conscious, you're pulling in breath and pushing out breath. It seems like it's maybe even a group, or you could do it by yourself, of course. But that's an exercise where you're setting intention, you're doing the breath work, and it's going to last 30 to 60 minutes, if not more. Is what you're talking about, Josh, is that the same thing? Is that the gateway to that? Like, how would you describe this as compared to what I've talked to Christian about?
What you're talking about with Christian is catharsis breathing. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's really powerful, actually. But the thing that everyone wants to understand right now is that breath has three phases, right? There's an inhale, there's a hold, and there's an exhale.
Right.
That's it. You can't do more than breath with that because that's all that breath has. Well, there's three phases of breath work as well. With breath work, there's acute stress, right? Like stage fright, panic attacks, fear of heights. There's specific modalities that we talk about and we teach in the Breathe Breath and Wellness program to get people to understand, like, okay, how do I manage my stress right now? How do I deal with my stress using my breath in this moment right now? That's acute. Next is a proactive or a meditative style of breath work. Meditation breath work is anywhere between 7 to 21 minutes or so, and it does not involve that rolling, massive catharsis breathing that you and Christian talked about. Meditation breathing is also what we teach in the program, and that's what really starts to ground you in so you can have more connection with your body, with yourself, with your thoughts. That's where the rubber meets the road for us. Is the meditative breathing practices. Because from there, you can really start to calibrate your nervous system and calibrate your true self to what's real and what's not real. That's where you can really start learning about who you are. Now, there is a place for what Christian is talking about, and this is the final phase that we talk about in Breathe, and that is catharsis breathing. In catharsis breathing, you're going through 30, 60, 90-minute sessions. You're being held by a practitioner who is skilled in this type of breath work, who knows how to adjust your body, who knows how to hold, quote, energetic space for you. And catharsis breathing can be incredibly powerful. I personally have had catharsis sessions with a teacher that I learned from in Sedona. Her name is Gwen Payne. And she taught me how to physically hold someone, but also psychically and spiritually hold someone as well. The sitter in psychedelic ceremonies, which, by the way, I do not, capital N-O-T, I do not recommend that people just jump to go do psychedelics. You are dealing with a power that you have no idea. You uncork that, it's like Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant. You better be careful. You better watch out. Do not just go jump into a psychedelic ceremony. Okay, so just really hear me out there. There's a progression to get there, which we can explore. But those are the three phases of breath work. Christian's phenomenal. He's a great practitioner. But catharsis breath work is not something that you want to do every day. Catharsis breath work is a maximum once a week, maybe twice a week, depending on the health of your nervous system. So I hope that painted a lens to begin the topic about breath work, because, just like there's the three phases of breathing, there's the three styles of breath work too.
Fantastic. So acute, meditative, and catharsis.
Yes.
For the breath work. Got it. That paints a really good picture for at least the folks that are listening to at least start to explore this modality. Okay, I want to ask you some more questions about your program, but you touched on something that I have to follow on. Now,
Sure.
The psychedelics, the ayahuasca ceremonies. I know you've done a few of them, Josh, and so can you describe to people what that ceremony is and what the outcome is when you go on that rocket ship? What happens?
Yeah. So for people that don't know, plant medicines, there's so many types of plant medicines. There's kratom, there's kava, which are more mild, right? Plant medicines. Then going up the scale, there's marijuana, which is a plant medicine. There's sassafras, which is a plant medicine. And then above that, you start getting into the more powerful entheogens like ayahuasca or iboga. And there's many different ways to experience this. Wachuma. The one thing that I want to say as a word of caution, in 2014, when I was introduced to plant medicines, I was looking for plant medicines to heal me. And I just want to pause there because everyone is looking for the external locus of control. And the only thing that helps you change your behavior and change how you show up, your money, your health, your wellness, everything, is an internal locus of control. No plant medicine ceremony, and I'll say this on the record, no plant medicine ceremony will ever heal you. None. The only thing that will heal you is you getting higher states of awareness from the plants. The plants open the door. You're the one that does the healing. And the mistake that I made, that I want to say right now, that everyone be careful, be cautious, be kind to yourself. Do not think that by going to a ceremony that the plants are going to heal you. You have to be in communion with the plants, and you have to let go of your ego, and you have to be open to, first of all, using your intuition. A lot of these places are not safe, right? Mm-hmm. The place you mentioned earlier in Costa Rica, I do not recommend people go there for multiple reasons that I cannot say on the record, but I think you all can feel my energy. So the reason that I say that is because it's very important that the setting of the space, the type of people that are in the space, and also the medicine and the quality that's being served is at the highest integrity, at the absolute highest integrity. If it's not, it can be extremely challenging for your journey. And so I've done 12 or 13 ceremonies with ayahuasca.
Wow.
And the reason that I am no longer called to ayahuasca is because ayahuasca gave me such a slap about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. I am still integrating. I am still learning. I am still processing the downloads that I received. And I do not wish what I went through on anyone. I'm going to be doing a podcast on Wellness Force about this topic with Hamilton Southern from Blue Morpho Retreats, who's been on the Aubrey Marcus podcast. We're going to explore the dark and the light of plant medicine. It is a powerful tool, just like a hammer. Guess what, Faraz? If I'm holding a hammer, I can kill you. I can also build a beautiful home with it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make the hammer bad. I'm not demonizing plant medicine. What I am saying is be cautious, be careful, be kind to yourself. Mm-hmm. Be kind to yourself. Do not put your internal locus of control in plant medicine's hands. Stay connected to yourself with your breath, with your decision to stay connected to you as you encounter any plant medicine ceremony of any kind. Because the mistake that I made, and the mistake that a lot of people make, they give up their internal locus of control. They say, plant medicine, heal me. The people that I'm sitting with, heal me. And guess what? It's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. You can shatter your psyche. You can go insane. I mean, people that go to these ceremonies, it is not for everyone. And I want to really caution against that.
Wow. Fascinating. I have not heard this viewpoint yet, so thank you for bringing that up. In fact, I've been researching just the slightest amount, and I've been toying with the idea of doing a plant storing ceremony at some point. But after doing some research of, how do I ground myself better? How do I, start to understand and take note of my shadow beliefs? I have come to the conclusion that connecting with my breath first and looking at areas where I react to the world in a fight or flight moment, and there's quite a few, is first working through that before I jump into the plant and say, I surrender, fix me.
Yes. And one thing too, I'm a huge proponent of strategic microdosing, and you can look more into Jamie Wheel's work from the Flow Genome Project on this. He has the hedonic calendar. Microdosing is different than doing a ceremony. Microdosing with the right kind of presence, the right kind of guidance and coaching can be incredibly powerful. Microdosing, I think it's more safe. I think it's a better path.
Okay, good to know. And the person you mentioned, I'm going to look her up in Sedona. I'm close by. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona right now.
Oh, wonderful! Please, yeah, let me connect you to. She's very good.
Awesome. I probably will be going to Sedona in a couple of weeks, so that'd be a great connection. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so we're coming up on time, Josh. We could talk all day, but tell us more about your Breathwork program. How can people, when they start to the 21 days, I believe that's how long it is.
Yes.
What progression do they see as they come in and out of the program?
The program was built for people that are dealing with chronic stress.
Which is everybody.
So, which is most people, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Chronic stress means that your blood sugar is elevated, and blood sugar can only be elevated for so long. Your cortisol is elevated. It means that energetically and mentally, you're feeling exhausted, you're feeling taxed. The reason I built the program is because breathwork was the only thing that saved my ass in plant medicine ceremonies. I got the notion, I got the hit in my psyche at 3 a.m. about 3 or 4 years ago, to make this program. And I was guided to make this program. Man, I'm getting like a chill in my body telling you this. I was guided to make this program because it was my breath that saved my life. It was my breath that allowed me to keep my internal locus of control. And I'll never forget this, Faraz. In 2017, I did a I did a breathing practice with Mark Divine at his Unbeatable Mind retreat here or not here, but in Encinitas. Mm-hmm. And shortly after that, I started doing more breath work and I started to cry, but I didn't know why I was crying. It was emotions being released. Look at the work of Bruce Lipton and Bessel van der Kolk on this, where the tissues store emotion. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I was being guided towards using breath work to like heal myself and to reconnect with myself. And so it's on my arm now. It's se posso respirare, posso scegliere. Mm-hmm. And that means if I can breathe, I can choose.
Is that Italian?
In Italian. Mm. And so if I can take a big breath through my nose, using my diaphragm properly, turning on my vagus nerve, and actually healing my body with every breath, which is so powerful. And all of us can do it. I don't care who you are, what condition you have. It's your breath that allows you and allows me to love and to connect and to be present and to get better, to get stronger. It all starts with the breath, period. So the program was built for people to give them real high quality tools in a short amount of time that they can practically use for acute stress management, for meditation breathing, and also an introduction to catharsis breathing. If they want to work with myself or another practitioner, they can. I don't recommend people do catharsis breathing on their own. We go over everything A to Z in this program that is really going to give you the tools where you can transcend these bullshit stories. We're going to turn down the default mode network. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've maybe talked about this on your show from neuroscientists. The default mode network, it scans for threats. It's our ancient system, the prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate, and the amygdala, as well as a couple more systems in the brain. These are ancient, very old systems that keep us wired for danger, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we can use breath, and we do this in the program, we teach you how to turn down the default mode network noise so that you can actually have a clear signal to yourself, right? The noise of life with our cell phones and our notifications and our just absolute insanity that we're going through right now with this psychology operation, which is called COVID-19, which is fucking fascinating that a year later, a 2-week lockdown, we're still experiencing this. Right. Can y'all wake up yet? The reason all this is happening for us is because we are being driven back into ourselves. We're being driven back into ourselves to take hold of our breath again. So this program was built for people that are dealing with chronic stress, that notice they have looping thoughts, that can't settle their systems down. Like if this is you, the breath is for you. You know, the Breathe, Breath, and Wellness program was built because in 3 weeks or less, you can start having mastery over your own stress responses. That is the most powerful thing that anyone could ever do. And thank you for asking me about it too, because gosh, when I look at anti-aging and when I look at the biggest hacks for us, self-awareness and breath work, incredibly powerful. There's one probably at the top. There's one thing I forgot to mention though. Mm-hmm. The most powerful thing that we have in the program, as well as addressing all three of those areas, is the use of cannabinoids. So we activate the endocannabinoid system via safe vape inhalation, right? This is no negative things. I forget the name of like PFCs, all that stuff. The program and the provider we use for our safe vape technology is called BioCBD Plus. I met the founder personally. I toured with him. I went down to Hawaii and visited him and learned about the product. This is not an unsafe vape. This is a safe vape technology. So once you've learned the 3 phases of breathing, in our later module in the Breathe program, I personally teach you how to use the ECS, the endocannabinoid system, via non-psychoactive CBD, inhaled, combined with breath. Yes, breath work on its own is powerful, but when you combine inhale CBD through a safe vape and you do breathing, the results are phenomenal. Not just anecdotally for me, but for multiple participants in our program. And also some of the research from King's College has talked about GABA and serotonin and a few other things that can really elevate this part of our nervous system, which is, the vagus. We're all trying to get more vagal tone. And we can do that through the breath, and we can do that with the cannabinoid system as well. So just to put that out there, like the big piece of all of this is let's let the science show us that the serotonin, the GABA, and the adenosine are something that we can all know when we do our cannabinoids, when we activate them through safe vape, but also through the breath work. What happens is you start toning your vagus. Wow. the blending of these systems is powerful. This is what we teach in the program. And I would love to give this gift to your audience. All you have to do is just go to breathwork.io, use the code anti-aging. So breathwork.io is the website, and the code is anti-aging. You get 50% off the program. I know these are my people. Like, I know you guys are my tribe because you want to live long. You want to have a long, healthy life. So my gift to you, 50% off, just use the code anti-aging at breathwork.io.
Well, thank you so much, Josh. First of all, that's a very generous code. I appreciate it. And man, like some of the things you've said, just fantastic. And the Breathwork program, sign me up right now. What you just told me and described it to me, I'm all in. Because here's the thing. You mentioned about awareness. Yes, absolutely. So important. The Breathwork will deepen your awareness, as we were talking about. Secondly, it's linked, like you can control your physiology and your response, your fight or flight response, which I was a management consultant. I was fight or flight all day, man.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know how to breathe few years ago. I was like a vertical breather, and now I've become much more horizontal. But I noticed that I carry trauma in my life because I freeze sometimes when things aren't going my way. I just notice myself and I go, what is my musculature doing? Like, why am I standing like this? Stand straight, like lean back, right? And so as much as the breath work, which is a free tool, by the way, it's not some light system or some latest biohack or some brain entrainment system that you have to pay thousands of dollars for. Yes. You have to pay hundreds of dollars for. This is free.
It's way less than you going to dinner.
Yes.
I'll just say it like that.
Yes. And
I priced it for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think just people learning about their breath and becoming proficient with using their breath to live a longer life is so important because, as you mentioned, it turns down cortisol response, turns down the adrenals. And as we know in the anti-aging world, stress and hypercortisol or too much cortisol is going to age you faster, is going to give you gray hair and all the things that we don't want. So to live long, healthy lives, this is a key modality that I hope that everybody starts to incorporate in their lives. So Josh, thank you so much for coming on, man. You've dropped a lot. As I said, we're just basically scratching the surface, but I hope to shake your hand hopefully this year and talk some more. But tell us about where people can find you. So the course is at breathwork.io. Where can people find you?
So you can go right to that page. You can go to breathwork.io. There's a video on the page. You can learn about who I am, what I stand for, what Wellness Force is about. When you go to that page, you'll also understand our program. But if you just want to generally understand us, just go to wellnessforce.com. Wellnessforce.com is the best place to start. There's also a free training tool that you can download there. So it'll be right on the homepage. There's a small breathwork practice there for you as well. So those are the two sites you can learn more about us and our work.
That's great. And again, I'll link to all of these links that you mentioned in the show notes for this episode, which is going to be at antiaginghacks.net/wellnessforce. So thank you again, Josh, for coming on the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Thank you for us. Thanks for having me, man.